Welcome back, Math 8. Today we are going to talk about how to get slope-intercept form from a graph. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing that I want for you to do is to look at this graph and find those pretty points and label them. Go ahead and pause the video and take a moment to do that. All right, so here are some of the pretty points. I did not find all of them, but if you did, that's amazing. I just found some so that my page didn't look super cluttered. Remember that in order to find a pretty point, it needs to be a part where our x-axis values and our y-axis values cross each other nicely so that we can see that exact value. So you can see them here because I have put the dots on those points and labeled them for you. All right, our goal for today is that I can distinguish the slope-intercept equation from a graph by identifying my slope and y-intercept. And our learner right responsibility for today is to take action on all feedback. But first, let's recall, what is the slope-intercept equation? Take a moment, pause the video, and try to remember the equation along with what the parts of it mean. All right, so let's remember that our slope-intercept equation is y equals mx plus b, where m represents the slope, which is our rise over run, and b is our y-intercept, or our beginning point. These are important things to remember, so don't forget them. We're going to need them. All right, and here is our first problem. So we have this graph, and we need to figure out what our equation is. The first thing that we need to do is we need to find those pretty points. Any two that you can find. It doesn't matter if it's the first one or the last one, if it's the ones in the middle. Any two pretty points that you can find will work. So for me, I see a nice pretty point right here, and this point is at 2, 3, so I'm going to write over here 2, 3. And then I can also see a nice pretty point right here, which I'm going to give it its label, which is at 0, -2. Oops, I didn't want to write that right there. You can, it's okay. I want to write it over here though. So we said 0, -2. So those are my pretty points. Those are the 2 points that I'm looking at in order to find everything else. So the first thing that we need to find, remember, is our rise to get our slope. So to get our rise, we need to count how many lines we go up from the bottom point up to the top. So from here, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my rise was 5. And then our run is how many we go side to side. So I'm going to run 1, 2. So my run was 2, which means that when I do my rise over run, I'm going to say that my slope is 5 over 2. I can also look at the direction of this and make sure that I'm good, right? I know that going up is positive and going to the right is positive because that's the directions that our positive numbers go. But I can also see that my line, my equation, my graph, is going in that upward positive direction, just like our P from our puns. So when I look at my direction, I'm going to say positive. And I know that a lot of you guys have your teachers telling you that it means that it goes up or that it points to the right, and those are acceptable as well. And when I look at my slope, I have to remember my steepness as well, right? Is this a super steep mountain that I do not want to climb? Or is this more like that driveway that I can definitely do? Take a moment, try to remember. Yes, it is the steep one because 5 over 2 is a value bigger than 1. Our graph is steep. That's a hill. Miss Simi does not want to climb that. If you do, that's good for you. Miss Simi is not one of those mountain climbers. All right, so now I need to find my y-intercept. And remember, our y-intercept is the point where our graph crosses the y-axis. So what's really nice here is that I actually have my nice pretty points on my y-axis, but I'm going to highlight it just so we can see it a little bit better. But right there, that is the point on our graph where it's crossing over that y-axis. So our y-intercept, we're going to say that our y intercept is at -2. Oops, that's still the highlighter. Our y-intercept is at -2, and so our beginning point is the same one from up here. We're just going to say that it is 0, -2. So now all that's left to do is to write all of this information into our slope-intercept equation, which is pretty simple. We are going to say that y equals our m, which is our slope, so 5/2 x, plus our y-intercept, which is -2. Now you can either write plus -2, you can, that's definitely an option, or you can just say -2, which is how we're going to see it most of the time. So our slope-intercept equation is y equals 5/2 x minus 2. And again, the spots where we got this information from, ooh, maybe that's a little hard to see. Let's do a different color. Maybe that was better. So our 5/2 came from right there. And maybe this blue will show up nicely. And our -2 right there. That's all it is. So now I want you to go ahead and give it a try. Go ahead and pause this video, try to find all of that information, and then write down your slope-intercept equation. All right, so here is our answers. So you might notice that I picked two pretty points that were rather far away from each other, and I missed one in the middle, and that's totally okay. Sometimes we just don't see the nice pretty point in the middle, and that's completely acceptable. So you'll see here I calculated that my rise was 4 and my run was -6. My run is -6 because I moved to the left, and the left is where my negative values are. So when I write down my slope, I had that it was 4 over -6. But again, because we missed that pretty point in the middle, we need to reduce our fraction. So 4 and 6 can both be divided by 2, which is how I got my 2/3. And because that 6 was negative, my entire fraction is negative, which means that the direction is also negative. It points down or to the left, depending on how your teacher taught it to you. And then, because I highlighted it, you can see that my y-intercept, where my graph crosses the y-axis, is at a +1, which means that my beginning point is at 0, 1. Our beginning point always starts with a 0 because the x value has to be 0 in order to stay on the y-axis. Now 2/3 is a number between 0 and 1, so it is shallow. Remember that our steepness does not care if the number is positive or negative. It just cares about the fraction itself. So when we put it all together, we're going to get that y equals -2/3 x plus 1. Hopefully you got it. All right, so now you guys are going to give it a try. I'm going to zoom out of here just a smidge so we can see all of it. I want you guys to write the slope-intercept form for each one of these graphs. So go ahead, pause your video so that you can write them down. Give it a try. I will give you the answers to the first two, but I want you guys to see if you feel confident with your answers for the second two. All right, so go ahead, pause the video. All right, here are your answers to the first two graphs. You'll notice that in the first one, it's just y equals 3/5 x, and there's nothing else. That's because my y-intercept is at 0, and I do not need to write +0. You can, that's definitely an option, but it's not necessary. So we just say that it's y equals 3/5 x. If you look at the second one, you'll notice that our slope is not a fraction. You can absolutely make it a fraction by putting it over 1, right? You'll notice that our rise is going to go down 2 and to the right 1. And 2 over 1 is the same exact thing as 2. And the direction is negative, so we need to make sure that our slope is negative as well. So we get y equals -2x plus 4, because 4 is where it's crossing that y-intercept, that y-axis, excuse me. So if you have not already, go ahead and try the last two. If you really want to know if you're right, go ahead and ask your teacher and they will check your answers for you. All right, and our last little bit is our closure. I want you guys to think about it. Which way do you think is easier? Do you think it's easier to write the equation from a graph, which is what we just did here? Or do you think that it's easier to graph based on the equation, which is what we did in the last video? And why? There's no right or wrong answer to this. It's completely based on you. I'm just curious. Everyone has their differences, and it's always interesting to see. Well, that's all that I have for you guys today. So have a lovely day, and I will see you later. Love you. Bye.